Hi everybody, let's talk about workers' compensation. Over the years I've dealt with a lot of different workers' compensation groups, some self-insured funds, other companies, insurance companies who handled or carried workers' compensation. And just keep in mind, workers' compensation is designed state by state. For an example, in Alabama, your workers' comp might not kick in until after your third day of being out of work. Some other states, in Arkansas, something along that line, could be 8 days after work. So just keep in mind that it works from state to state, and the state sets the regulations and the state sets the rules when we're dealing with workers' compensation. But there's no doubt in my mind that workers' comp sometimes can be a major expense for any company. A company with over 5 employees may be required to carry workers' comp insurance. So I just want to talk just for a few moments about how to get the best out of your workers' comp, maybe how you can help control your workers' comp premium by preventing accidents and injuries, and how your safety library could certainly play a major role in that. So when we talk about workers' compensation, the first thing that I look for with a company, especially if I'm working with that company, is what kind of underwriting program do they have? Are they able to look at a company's past 3 years or past 5 years, whatever they ask for, most of the time 3, and kind of evaluate the company, gather enough information to tell you a little bit about what the company has been doing. What kind of losses have they had, what kind of accidents and injuries, the frequencies and the severity rates, which would equate out to a loss ratio once we see how the premium versus the losses and all of that. So looking at the underwriting program, I've worked for some companies who had the world's worst underwriting program. I've worked with some that were very good at underwriting, and I think that's where it starts at. If you have a good insurance company who is gathering the appropriate amount of information, good information, and they're making good decisions on the companies that they're bringing in or the companies that maybe they're insuring, that underwriting information is invaluable. But once you have the underwriting information in place, and maybe you've signed some kind of binder or whatever, and you've made the deck page and you're going with this workers' comp company, the next thing in my mind is loss control. Yeah, in corporate America, we call it safety program. In the insurance industry, we call it loss control. It's pretty much the same. You still want to prevent accidents and injuries, whatever term you use. In the corporate world, we're using safety as that name. We do want to prevent accidents and injuries to our employees. That is number one. In the insurance industry, you really want to prevent accidents and injuries, but at the same time, you want to prevent spending money. So it's called loss control, so to speak. And having a really good loss control program with an insurance company, one that offers a lot of benefits for you, who has loss control engineers who may come out and visit with you. They might walk through your facility. They may look at your training programs. They may look at your work procedures and habits. And sometimes loss control engineers or risk management engineers, either one, can make some recommendations that may help you prevent accidents and injuries and may help you along the way lower your costs. Because remember, in most cases, and I can only speak from the experience that I have dealt with, it could be different in other areas, but typically when you bring a new company in on workers' comp, their mod rate would be like a 1.0. And after a couple of years of experience, your experience mod either goes up or down, depending on what kind of accidents or injuries that you've had. If your experience mod drops to a 0.85, then you've had some really good experiences and you've had no losses, and your mod is starting to drop. But if that mod goes from a 1 to a 1.3, then obviously you've had some pretty serious losses. You've had some pretty serious accidents and injuries, and sometimes it's not frequency. Sometimes it's one big bang you get hit by some kind of critical accident or injury or something like that costs a lot of money. There's no doubt there are some places where if an employee spends 6 weeks in a critical care unit, you're talking over $800,000, maybe $1 million right there. So you can look at some things. A good knee injury sometimes, if it's a good knee injury that requires some kind of knee surgery, you can easily go $50 to $60 to $70,000 depending on what needs to be done. A rotator cuff, I've seen rotator cuffs go over $100,000 once you've gone through the surgery, gone through all the rehab and all the things to get you back to where you need to be so you can go back to work and so forth. It can be very, very expensive. So preventing accidents and injuries is not only the right thing to do for your employees, it's a good financial move, a good economic move, that you have a good safety program in place. And that's where your safety library can come in and help you out. There are plenty of videos and PowerPoints and handouts and things that you need to constantly promote safety to your employees to help prevent accidents and injuries and keep this on their mind all the time. And I know sometimes we get to pushing for production, but still, first and foremost, safety. Safety and production should be on the same line. So you have safety, quality, and production. There are some places that I visit that I help them with their safety program, and they call them SQP. It's safety first, quality, then production. And so I kind of like that. So keeping that focus, and keep in mind, a good safety program or a good loss control program, whatever you want to call that, starts with the CEO, and it starts from the CEO all the way to the newest employee. They talk about safety as a line item. That line runs from the CEO all the way to the new employee. Outside of that, it really doesn't work as well as it could have if it was running that line from the CEO down to the new employee. Sometimes companies will just charge the frontline supervisors with, okay, safety is yours, you're going to be held accountable, blah, blah, blah. No, that's not the way it works. CEO all the way to the newest employee. Making sure that you're doing the things that you need to be doing. Make sure you're constantly doing your safety meetings, your safety walkthroughs, have your safety committee in place. I think that's always important, that we run safety committees and get the input from employees. And when they find something that they want to talk about, maybe it needs repairing or maybe it needs to have someone take a look at it, make sure we follow up, make sure we do those things, and it just helps bring a lot of different people to the table and get more people involved in your safety program, and that is a huge win-win right there. So making sure you have good underwriting, number one, making sure you have good loss control or a good safety program, number two, and even with that loss control safety program, if you have a really good one in place and you do have an OSHA visit or have a complaint, or maybe you're on some kind of special emphasis program, you'll be in much better shape when OSHA comes to visit and they look over your program as well. So that's another thing that your insurance company loss control people could help you with, making sure that you have programs in place that apply to your specific industry. And sometimes what happens is some mom and pop companies do really well out there. Capitalism works really well in the United States, and you have a mom and pop that starts out as a small business, and they continue to grow, and then they grow into some regulations that they may not even be aware of. And that's where someone or a third set of eyes watching what you're doing sometimes is a huge help. Now, once I have a good underwriting program in place and I have a good loss control program in place, number three is going to be claims management. So whenever we do have an accident or injury, I want to make sure that the claim is properly handled, and we have people on staff at the insurance company, whoever it is you work with, get to know your claims manager, get to know them on a personal basis so that you can talk to them openly about what's going on with this particular claim, what has taken place, who said what. And I can't say enough about documentation. If you have an accident or an injury and you have those supervisor first reports of injuries, getting all the documents in the world that you can is always helpful. Even if a supervisor in the past has maybe had to correct this employee or maybe discipline this employee for certain actions that were being taken, maybe they've taken shortcuts or in a hurry or something along that line, be sure to document that. Even though it's verbal, be sure to write down the date and the time and what you said and what the employee was doing. If it's number 2 pencil and spiral notebook, that is still solid gold somewhere down. You may need that somewhere down the road, especially if it goes to number 4 and goes into litigation. You may need some of that information. But having a good claims manager who can look over that claim and can help you with making the decisions, because the claims manager will handle all the medical procedures and set up the appointments and things of that nature, and kind of handle the medical end of the claim, and making sure that you get the most efficient, most economic, but the appropriate care that you need under your workers' comp program. Claims managers have a very tough job. Have the information that the claims manager needs, your employer's first report of injury, any other documentation that would help that person make good decisions on this claim. I also say whenever you have employees, and if it's where you can, it is really, really helpful for the claims manager, also the physician that may be working with the injured employee, that you have job descriptions in place so that when an employee goes to the emergency room or to a doctor because of some kind of injury, there is a job description that goes with that employee. Sometimes you depend on an employee to tell what they do every day. And I've run into this a number of times, and this is where we get some confusion sometimes, and you have people who have some kind of sprain or strain, and all of a sudden the doctor writes them out of work for 3 weeks, and you're saying, what's going on here? But make sure that that job description goes, because sometimes if an employee's moving 5 pounds 10 times a day, sometimes when it's told to the doctor it's 50 pounds 30 times a day, and the doctor says, well, you can't do that with that. Make sure they understand what the job description is, what is really going on. And that's why I like to send written job descriptions to the physician. So supply that information to your claims manager. That's a huge help at any time. And if for some reason the claim absolutely goes south, and sometimes they will, sometimes you just cannot get everybody on the same page, and it's just not going to work out, and maybe the employee files a suit, then you get into some litigation. Having some good legal people on board is always a big help, and it's something that you will need at some point if that employee files suit. A lot of times I don't understand why they file suit, because typically the state has set all the schedules and all the fees and all the things, and in my mind, and not always, but in my mind, in most cases, you just basically gave away part of the money that you may have gotten from a state schedule through a workers' comp program. But either way, I think a good legal defense, making sure you have all your I's dotted, your T's crossed, and again, that's where a lot of that information that you've documented, that's where it's really going to come in and be helpful. You don't know how helpful it is until you need it and you don't have it, and then you realize how helpful it is. So all during the course of time, getting in the habit of documenting these little things is really a huge help. It's not that all employees are bad. They are not bad. They do really good work, but sometimes when something happens, they get input from families and get input from other people, and you have attorneys out there who sometimes are on TV all the time calling, if you've been injured, call me, that type stuff. So you want to be prepared for that kind of thing, because it does happen, and it happens often. So again, when you're looking at your workers' comp program, make sure you provide the underwriter with some good information, because that is huge. Make sure the company has good underwriters, loss control, safety program, risk management, whatever they call it, and that they can come out and help you, or they can provide some kind of services is always big. Claims management, get to know your claims manager or the team that you may be working with there. And then what kind of litigation do you, from a corporate standpoint, or maybe what kind of litigation does your workers' comp TPA supply? Now, a lot of your self-insured workers' comp funds, maybe they'll have their own TPA, their third-party administrator, and they may have their own legal team and their own loss control team, and all that is a huge help if you can get in with someone like that. Or your insurance company could provide all those as well. But just keep in mind, your safety library is one of the tools that you can use that will certainly help you reduce accidents and injuries. And when you reduce accidents and injuries, you reduce the losses. And that equates out to lower premiums and more economic, more efficient for your business to work. And so there you go. That's my spiel on workers' compensation. Hope it's been helpful. Be happy to answer any questions if you decide to email or or respond back. I'll do the best I can, but again, it's very important. It's required in so many cases, so it's something you certainly want to keep your eye on so that you stay economic, stay up to speed on all the rules and regulations, and take it from there. And have a very good day.